Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. Dr. Aleksandra Gajer is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out her first appearance on episode 964 of Boundless Body Radio. Dr. Aleksandra Gajer is a board certified physician and a leading expert in metabolic health, hormone balance, and performance medicine. She is the founder of the Gajer Practice, a root cause focused medical clinic helping patients transform their health from the inside out. Her work combines advanced diagnostics, lifestyle medicine, and science-based backed innovation, to heal metabolism, restore hormonal harmony, and enhance whole body performance. With over 12 years of clinical experience, Dr. Gajer has helped thousands of patients break through stubborn weight gain, fatigue, and hormonal imbalances by targeting the true underlying dysfunction, not just the symptoms. Her approach blends personal nutrition, targeted peptide therapy, strategic supplementation, and, when appropriate, medications to optimize metabolic and hormonal function at every stage of life. Whether helping high achieving professionals, midlife women, or those recovering from burnout, her protocols are designed to build resilience, sharpen vitality, and restore confidence. Dr. Gajer is also a contributing author of the best-selling book, Triumphs of Transformation, Inspirational Stories of Resilience and Life Change, which was featured in Times Square and in over 300 media outlets. Dr. Aleksandra Gajer, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be back.
It is an honor to host you. It's so funny. We were wrapping up our conversation the first time, and I asked you the standard question, where can people go to find you and connect with you in your work? And it was almost just like an
Mhm.
afterthought. I mentioned the book that you were in, and you briefly mentioned, where people could find the book. And we got off the call, I faded everything down, and we ended, and we were talking offline. And you were telling me a little bit about the content of this book. And I said, what? This is probably a really amazing story. Do you think we could maybe capture this in a second episode? And you gracefully said yes. So thank you so very much. I'm really excited to dive into some of the content today.
Yeah, me too.
That's awesome. Before we do, I did want to ask a follow-up question on our last episode. We talked a lot about metabolic health. We talked a lot about some of the lifestyle things that people can do to be changing. And from all of your content that I've seen, I consider you an absolute expert in somebody that can help with not only weight loss, but weight loss stalls. It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently. I'm wondering if you can comment. Obviously, this is going to be highly individualized, client to client and patient to patient. But can you maybe explain why it is that some people find a lot of success and find that sometimes that kind of slows down and people get into a very frustrating stall?
Yeah, absolutely. This, I think, is a very common scenario. I think most people will go through a plateau. If you are on a weight loss journey, plateaus are really part of the journey. And it's really usually when, not if, if it's going to happen. And the body tends to protect a set point. We find a set point that the body is happy and comfortable, and the body wants to basically preserve energy and protect a set point as well as possible. So sometimes we reach those plateaus and the body's just no longer listening to all those inputs, whatever they were, whatever those strategies were to get to where you got so far. And I think, there are a lot of strategies for breaking through plateaus, but um, a lot of things are just changing things up a little bit. So if you've been doing a certain type of exercise, maybe switching to HIIT, doing high intensity intervals, sometimes will break the body out of that plateau and trying something different for a period of time just to give your body a different signal that we still want to tap into these fat stores. They're still usable. So I think that doing HIIT exercises, sometimes changing your dietary strategy and potentially adding some fasting in there or going keto for a period of time can unlock some of those fat stores. And again, just create a different input to say, hey, we're still going, we're still on this journey. I think there's also several barriers to weight loss that some people hit. So sometimes the plateau is actually your body telling you that there's a barrier in your body to weight loss. The most common barrier Americans see is insulin resistance, and I think we talked a little bit about that the first episode. And just measuring a fasting insulin, which is like a $3 lab test, can give you an idea if you're insulin resistant. And anybody who's over 7 usually is insulin resistant. Um, And there's a lot of strategies. I won't go into all of them, but there's a lot of strategies specifically for that. Other barriers that I see are hormonal imbalances, especially for women and perimenopause, in men, low testosterone, thyroid disorders, inflammation can be its own. And we can probably talk for an hour for each one of these. But sometimes, that the weight loss efforts can overcome the barriers up to a certain point. So if you're switched your strategy and sort of are going at it the best you can and things aren't moving still, trying to understand physiologically if you are coming up against one of these barriers. For some people, it's sleep or stress, but they can be very real barriers that keep a plateau stuck.
Yeah, well, I love the idea of changing things up. The HIIT exercises is a really interesting idea. I get so stuck in thinking that like what I do, the protocols that I use are like the very best ones and they're proven by science. And so I always just kind of stick with those. And I forget that there's so many other ways to exercise for many different reasons, if nothing else, just to have a change of scenery, keep people interested and that sort of thing. So I
Mhm.
think that's wonderful. I'm also glad that you mentioned fasting. Fasting to me is kind of one of like the gold standard things when everything else doesn't seem like it's working. And just even in really simple ways, like having somebody eat the same things, but maybe crunch in the time
Exactly.
during the day that they're doing that. Maybe skip, a meal at one of the ends of your day. Maybe skip breakfast. A lot of people aren't even that hungry for breakfast and find that can be quite easy. I feel like that can
Mhm.
get things going pretty well. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also just want to, I think the thing that people do that can sometimes be harmful is people start to over restrict. And it seems things are working well at this calorie number, and then we start restricting, and things aren't moving, and you're barely eating, and your body's not thriving anymore. So I think with intermittent fasting, we want to make sure that it's intermittent. You don't want to be on a starvation diet. I think we need to dispel those myths that less is more, and there's the whole dogma of prior decades of weight loss is eat less, move more to some extent, but not entirely. You have to be nourishing your body. Those hormones are not going to thrive. You will not have the right environment for healthy weight loss and, protecting your muscle if you're not fueled. So fasting is amazing. Just like you said, there's so many longevity benefits. Just make sure it's intermittent.
Intermittent. Yeah, I absolutely love that. I told you last time you were on the show that my work in previous part of my career was working on metabolic carts and testing people's resting metabolic rate. And it's such a fine line
Mhm.
because people that were doing restricted diets, their metabolic rates would be suppressed by a few hundred calories,
Right,
like very noticeable. The people that were doing fasting, again, as long as they were nourishing when they were eating, their
right.
metabolisms weren't even like normal where they should have been. They were several hundred calories higher. And I think a big part of that is also how much of the fat energy that you store on the body. It's obviously not a great idea to do fasting when you're quite lean because you're going to start to somewhat, run out of those fat stores and not get the nutrients and the nutrition that you're talking about, which is
100%.
huge.
Yes,
But for somebody who does have a lot of weight, they may be able to tap into fasting, and that might be an amazing tool.
absolutely. Totally
Yeah.
agreed.
Well, that's awesome. One last question on that note. We, again, last conversation we had, we talked a lot about the lifestyle stuff. There's a lot more other technologies that you guys offer at your institute that I don't see them as like, and maybe I'm wrong. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't see them as like the main percentage. Like, I don't think if you can't get the diet reasonably dialed in, there's a lot of these tools that I don't know how effective they might be. Again, correct me if I'm wrong there. But how do you think about bringing in some of the other technologies that you guys use with somebody who is in a stall? Is that
Yeah.
just super highly individualized?
It's individualized, but I think we can. So, I think that there's two ways to look at it. So for of course, everything works better if you've already done what you can from the lifestyle angle. But there are people who are too stressed out, too burned out, have so many demands on their lives that it's really hard for them to make the choices that I would like them to make in terms of exercise and diet. And sometimes we use peptides and supports of that nature to work with the body to make good choices easier. And I think it's somewhat of a circular where, we give you physiologic support so that you can make good choices, so that maybe we can dial things in a little bit more. So there are a number of peptides. And again, I talk about those barriers to weight loss. Some people hit a plateau. And when we do some labs and when we talk a little bit more about their health, their gut health, their joints, it turns out that inflammation, there's a fire burning inside their bodies, and then we'll use something like BPC 157 or KPV, and suddenly everything they were doing for weight loss works because there's no longer this huge inflammatory issue. Um, and the subtle things that are the things that are a little bit harder, people I think underestimate what an impact sleep and stress makes on the body. And I think we often misunderstand stress as like, well, there's nothing actually going on in my life. I'm just doing my job and taking care of my kids. But it's that chronic stress. It's that like foot on the gas, your body's still experiencing your life as a stressful experience. There are some peptides that actually can really help with sleep and stress. And so we do use them strategically to knock down some of those barriers so that people don't hit those plateaus. And I think, my whole perspective is that everything we do, I want to improve your quality of life. And of course, being at a healthy weight improves your quality of life. Having good lean muscle mass, but also sleeping and feeling like you can manage the stress in your life, all that improves the quality of your life. So I think there's lots of strategies, and peptides have been amazing in helping people get to where they want to be.
I love that. One of my favorite presentations that I attended last year at a conference was a nutrition professional who stood up and said, it's a mostly low carbohydrate type kind of conference. And she said, all of
Mhm.
this that we're talking about, all of these strategies, they're supposed to make your life better. They're not supposed to make you
Right.
miserable and hate your life and hate doing a stupid diet or whatever. Like this is supposed to be good. And so if it doesn't feel like it's improving your life, like you may want to, think about it a little bit differently. The last kind of lifestyle question I do want to ask you. I know you work with supplementation. Again, very high level, generally speaking, maybe two or three of your very favorite supplements that you feel like most people could benefit from.
Yeah. So I think the supplements, probably with the most research, are omega-3 fatty acids. Those are highly anti-inflammatory. I think they're now we can actually check what people's omega levels are, and most people in the US are low, and they're very protective for inflammation, for heart health, for brain health. So I think that pretty much everyone could benefit from a fish oil supplement or something of that nature. Um, Vitamin D, a lot of people are low on vitamin D. And if you are low, I think that can be really, really helpful as well. I like CoQ10, which is a mitochondrial coenzyme, because again, when we're looking for those barriers and when we think about the environment that we live in, which is so different than that of our great 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 grandparents, there's so many chemicals in our environment now that our body has to contend with. That mitochondrial health, or the health of those parts of the cells that are making energy, has really declined. So that can be really, I like CoQ10 as a mitochondrial cofactor as well, just to improve our energy levels and the way that we're producing energy. So those are
Love
two.
that.
And magnesium. Magnesium is amazing. It's involved in 300 plus reactions in the body, and helps you sleep, helps your muscles and your joints. So
Yeah, I love that.
magnesium glycinate specifically.
Okay. Okay. I know there's like tons of different variations. They all have different like
Tons.
benefits. And yeah. Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
listening to a podcast with an expert all about omega-3 fish oil. And the question was asked, I've heard it asked a lot more in the last few years. The question was asked, this is a polyunsaturated fat. They can be fairly fragile. Do these fats get damaged in the processing and making of these things? And he said it's such a small deal against like the benefits you can gain. And it's funny too, over time, like if I would have asked you that question 20 years ago, I would have expected somebody to say, take a multivitamin, take a vitamin C, and you never hear about those things as much as you used to. So it's kind of interesting how that evolves over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, unfortunately, the research is very challenging on supplements, and it's a highly unregulated industry, but we're gaining a little bit more knowledge, which is good.
Well, I appreciate that. I didn't prepare you for any of that. Didn't tell you that we were going to talk about all of it. It's something that we have to deal with a lot. Transformation. This book that came out features a bunch of different people, including yourself. I have gone as far as going to the website to see the cover. It's absolutely a beautiful book. But I've tried to keep myself completely naive to this story. So I have no idea what is in there, things that seems like things that you've obviously gone through in your personal life. Would you rather start out by talking about the book itself and what it is, or would you rather just jump straight to your own personal story that apparently made it in?
Yeah, I'll do a brief intro to the book. So, the book was a compilation of stories of people who have gone through significant challenges that have met some success in their careers later in life. And the project was headed by a woman who's a psychologist and a resiliency expert. And she basically recruited others who are willing to tell their story. And this, things in life always happen in funny ways, but I heard her on a podcast and she said, I have one more spot in this book. Somebody dropped out and I'd really like another story, and she gave a sense of what she was looking for. So I just sent her an email and I said, hey, I have a story if you want it. And we started talking and yeah, I ended up writing the story. And I'll be honest up front that it's a very vulnerable experience. There are things in there that I was unsure if I wanted to share with the general public. Um, because they're personal but I think they are important. And I think that in the end, what I do in my practice is help people transform their lives, whether it's about hormones or weight or whatever. Everybody wants to feel good and everybody wants to thrive. And I think transformation is messy. You sometimes see people at the finish line and they look so good. And you think, wow, this person's had this like easy road. But when you lift the hood, you'll see that for a lot of people, the process from A to B is messy. So I met a number of amazing people who also wrote their stories and who went through their version of the mess that turned into something really great in the end. So that was kind of the context for
That's
the book.
I have no idea what the story is going to be, but as you just mentioned vulnerability, like right, you lost me right
Mhm.
there. Like I would not share any of that. So I have so much respect for people who do because it does really, really help. And yeah, oftentimes we see that the end product like you're describing without realizing like oh, they had to travel a ways to get there. So that's a
Yeah.
cool opportunity. Would you have considered yourself a writer before being involved in the book?
Um, Maybe not particularly. I write a blog, I write for my patients. I do enjoy, I write about medical topics, but in this sort of in this arena, not as much. This was kind of a first.
Okay. Wow. All right. Well, where should we start with the story?
Yeah. So I in the story I talk about my early life where I was born in Poland. I was born in Poland. My family came to the US from Poland when I was 7. We had kind of the immigrant experience, which was challenging in a lot of ways. We left Poland in 1989 when communism was crumbling,
Wow.
and everybody wanted to get out, of course. And there was a lot of civil unrest, and people in my family were getting arrested for distributing anti-communist pamphlets. Which was all, there was a lot happening, but it was my parents wanted something better. So my dad was doing a PhD in mathematics, and he got an opportunity to get into an exchange program where he could finish his PhD in New York. So we left Poland, we came to the US and sort of tried to live the American dream, um, which ended up going really well in the end. But of course, there's always a messy middle. And I think that early experience immigrating, not speaking English, number of things. My adolescent life was fairly turbulent, and I turned to substances to some degree, and just was kind of lost for a number of years, where I didn't know exactly what I was doing with life. And I think that was a really important experience for me. It kind of on the at 20 years old, I kind of came out of this, and actually my mom took me on a meditation retreat, and I had like a pretty profound experience there with meditation, which kind of changed the trajectory of my life. And um, I think up to that point, there was a lot of things that I was kind of running from, and I learned how to stay really present, and that kind of became a guiding force in my life. And I decided to study medicine, and I think those turbulent times really informed um, how I could show up for people down the road.
Wow.
So.
You're lying about the English thing. There's no way you didn't come out of the womb speaking English. You don't even have an accent at all. That shocks me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I learned as a child, obviously. So I was 7 when I came, but I remember asking what language people speak in the US. You know, it was like there was no concept whatsoever. And it was a rude awakening, and life was in that time period. I think life in Poland in the 80s was kind of like the 50s in the US. You know, we have no colored pictures, everything was black and white. There was a lot of scarcity. You know, you were waiting long lines for anything. Um, Everything, even the food was very much produced locally just because there was such a shortage of real stock. So we had the neighbors who had a cow where we got the milk, and these people had the beehives with the honey, and the butchers and the egg, things kind of all came, and it was simple. And I think coming to the US, it was like a barrage, an overwhelm of things. People had so much, that it was an interesting experience.
Wow. So one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life was changing schools. And I'm talking like
Mm.
my family moved 5 miles down the road in very, very sheltered Salt Lake City Valley. Like this is like as smooth as it gets for most people. And changing school was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. Borderline kind of traumatic with the bullying and everything that kind of came up as we moved schools. I can't imagine what you had to go through. What was it like socially? What memories do you have as a child kind of going through that education system?
Yeah, it was very challenging. And also I think I came from this community in Poland that where families were living together, and I had a lot of people around me, grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, and we came here, and it was just my parents. My dad had to work extra hard in order to make ends meet for us. We lived in a two-bedroom apartment, one bedroom, me, my mom, and my dad, the other bedroom, another couple who had come from China for the same reason. So five of us in this two-bedroom apartment, us not speaking good English, also just primarily speaking Chinese. So I think it was it was just there was a lot of unknown, and there was a big adjustment period.
Yeah, there would have to be. That's crazy. Okay, so you
Yeah.
go on this the retreat. So it's very
Hmm.
transformative, life changing. Where did you go? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, so this was something that my mom came up with, and it was local. It was with a mindfulness meditation community. And I think it was just a point in my life where I was receptive to something different, where the strategies I had for kind of coping with change up to that point weren't working well. And um, I was put in the right place in the right time. And this sort of practice of finding stillness and being with life as it truly is, um, became really important to me. And it actually like woke up this desire to like really help people in a meaningful way, which I think never went away, and has been kind of a driving force in my career. And yeah, slowly I decided to go to medical school. I did all the things, and I was and still am, but I was very, very passionate about making this happen. Um, and the whole experience of medical school itself is also quite challenging. And I had my first child in medical school, and then um, during residency, I had my second child, and in between those two, I had a health issue of my own where I got pretty bad Lyme disease. So again, a number of stressors. I think that um, the intensity of my work, and this health diagnosis kind of changed my path again, where I did a residency in emergency medicine. Um, and I really liked it, but I found that like with the Lyme, even though, I did the treatment, um, I didn't come back to who I was beforehand in terms of my performance. I wanted to still obviously perform athletically and in all these ways that I felt like my body wasn't the same. And of course, it's interesting. We started talking about inflammation, but this kind of drove my interest in um, going beyond my conventional training. And I was in the ER for 10 years total, but for a lot of those years, I spent a lot of my time studying what else is out there. What didn't I learn in medical school and in training that can go beyond what I've gotten to help me get to a level of performance that where I feel really good. And then of course, how can I give that to other people?
For somebody like me that lives out west, we're not exposed to Lyme disease very much. I'm sure most of the other listeners know
Mhm.
exactly what it is and live in places where it is. Can you explain a little bit? It's tick based, is
Yeah.
that correct?
It's a tick-based illness, yes. And um, we call Lyme the great imitator because it can show up as so many other disease processes, and the diagnosis is often missed. Some people get a tick bite and then a bullseye rash, and you know exactly what's going on, um, and they get treatment and everything's fine. But a lot of people never find the tick, and the diagnosis can go unmade for a long period of time, which is what happened to me. I went hiking in Vermont in shorts, and that's another Lyme-ridden area. Um, and then I came back, I had mild flu-like symptoms. And then I started to have some neurologic symptoms where I started getting these debilitating headaches. Um, and it was about 4 months after that initial exposure. And then it led to a number of symptoms, but it was a long time to get the diagnosis. Even though I was in the middle of medicine. I was doing my residency. I was surrounded by doctors. I had so much input. It took a long time to figure out what was going on, get the conventional treatment, and then rebuild. But Lyme can show up as so many different things and so many of what we call non-specific symptoms. So those patients that kind of come in and say something's wrong, but I don't know what it is. But it can really affect the nervous system, the nerves. I had vitritis and optic neuritis, which are issues in the back, inflammatory issues in the back of the eyes, which kind of helped make the diagnosis. There's often Bell's palsy, which can cause drooping on one side of the face. Some people get terrible arthritis or muscle aches. So it's a variety of things. And it's a challenging to diagnose. And if it goes undiagnosed for a longer period of time, it can be quite challenging to treat.
So is it something that you get cured from, or is it something that you manage for the rest of your life?
So I think that's a interesting question. And I think there are different thought schools of thought about this. In terms of eradicating the infection, yes, you can get cured from it. You can have it and then you don't have it anymore. And there are different theories that there might be these biofilms that hide some of the infection under the biofilms, and they're difficult to get to. And then in periods of stress, your body sort of uncovers some of these. I think that it's one of those things that can leave a lasting mark on how your immune system works, and especially inflammation and response to other infections. And it can impact the way your hormone health, and the way everything else in your body um, shows up later. And I think that's what a lot of conventional medicine misses, but not just Lyme. Long COVID, I think, does the same thing. And there's a number of other things that I think we overlook on a regular basis that change it, that may be cured, but it causes a meaningful change in the way your body responds to life and to your environment that requires a lot of time and attention to heal.
Yeah. And you mentioned being surrounded by, amazing medical professionals, people that are, in school, graduated from school, doctors everywhere. What is the conventional treatment, and did that help you at all?
Right. So the conventional treatment is antibiotics. And yes, it helped a little bit, but I'm working 80 hours a week at this point in the emergency department with a 2-year-old at home. So I was not satisfied with helping a little bit. I needed to get back to where I was. And, I needed to get back to a level of performance that could support my goals in life. And I think that the antibiotics, the conventional treatment, didn't repair what the Lyme did in terms of my immune system and hormonal balance and all those things.
Yeah. It's an interesting story because like you're going through the medical system and you're learning this, but you're also having, you know, some experiences with Eastern medicine. And
Yes.
oftentimes kind of the conventional what we're taught in Western medicine is kind of we think of the Eastern stuff as kind of more woo, but here you are, you go to a meditation class, you discover something about yourself, you're able to get through, school and training. And again, like being in emergency medicine, talk about helping people. Absolutely, like you're the first person we go see when something's wrong. But also like this other kind of side of you that's like discovering Eastern practices, and there's other ways of
Mm.
helping people and trying to either bring that into a conventional practice, or maybe at some point you're going to have to go out on your own. Can you talk about some of those challenges as well?
Yes. And I think that's really interesting. And I think my life and professional career has been a balance of those things, um and I think there's something valuable in both. How could there not be? How could a whole part of the world be wrong? You know, Seems to me eventually it seemed like common sense that of course there's wisdom in both. And I think my goal has been let me find a way to bring this together in a practical and meaningful way for people. But I think, yes, in training, we are heavily indoctrinated that, like, this is the only way, and evidence-based medicine is the only lane. And I think evidence-based medicine is wonderful in the sense that we don't want to offer a treatment that we don't have enough data for that could potentially cause harm. But there are a number of things that live outside of that model that can be really helpful, um, especially when it comes to, well, less conventional, maybe, and and I think it's kind of hard to break this down, Eastern versus Western, but I think that the way I think about it now is when it comes to meditation and those kinds of practices, that's just that's a lot of things. It's a whole tradition. But in terms of our physiology, that's nervous system regulation. And the nervous system impacts how we experience anything. Nothing in the body works in isolation. So the nervous system will determine how a disease expresses itself. And most patients with chronic illness know that their symptoms are worse during times of stress. And then when they're happy or engaged and something really great is happening and they're calm, symptoms tend to be lower. And sometimes it seems like, oh, why is that happening? But the nervous system, your fight or flight response, the hormones that we produce make a huge impact on how we experience symptoms of any kind. And it's very hard to heal, I would say, from anything with a dysregulated nervous system.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned your practice in emergency medicine. Just a very quick sidebar. You remember our last conversation when I asked you what percentage of cases you would see in the emergency room were related to chronic health conditions versus acute health conditions? I was just on a bike ride with a really, really good friend of mine who works in emergency medicine. He's a doctor in an ER. I asked him the same question. It was word for word what you said. It's the answer I get back every single time. I just because that happened like 2 hours ago, I wanted to put that in there. Um, oh,
Yeah.
so eventually, I mean, you're getting paid by the conventional medical system. Eventually, again, you're feeling like you want to step out on your own. Is this something you also write about? Like there must have been, it must have been difficult for you to go out on your own when, again, like you've been a professional, you probably understand the ins and outs of the business and the flow of things and whatever, but not feeling satisfied, that you're not helping people to the level that you wanted to. What was that experience like?
Yeah. Terrifying. But so I think I got very lucky and I got a unique opportunity that I um, was able to capitalize on. But I think the important part was that I did have this, it felt like I wasn't in the right place. I did a lot in the emergency department that I'm really proud of, and I'm really grateful for my training and the years that I got to be there. Um, and it will always be a cherished time in my life just because of the impact that I got to make in other people's lives. And I'm grateful that I got to do that. But there was a sense of I'm not where I'm supposed to be. This is, first of all, partially for my own nervous system. I'm healing from this chronic illness. I have small kids, and there was on a visceral level, felt like this isn't it for me. So, I'm doing all these things on the side, taking courses, studying. And I met another physician who, almost by accident, who was an older physician who owned a medical practice that was an internal medicine practice, cash pay, so direct pay, with a weight loss program. And he said to me, as I was walking out the door of a function we were at together, "Hey, if you're thinking about buying a medical practice, I'm retiring and I want to sell mine." And I laughed because I was like, that's absurd, but thank you, sir. Um, you know. I did not have resources or even any concept in my mind, but I called him and I said, what, let's talk about this. And we formed a relationship, and he had some other offers, but he had built this practice and he really wanted someone to take over who would take care of the patients he'd been taking care of for 40 years. And I did a lot of digging, eventually figured out how to get an SBA loan, and I was able to buy the practice from him and step into this practice and continue his internal medicine practice, and then kind of jump in. And initially, what I did is just really optimize the weight loss program to be kind of a metabolic health transformation. And then things kind of naturally built from there. Then I started adding some hormone health and started working more towards performance and health optimization. And I feel like I got really lucky, where it was one of those serendipitous universe moments where I got this opportunity to take something that was already working beautifully. He was a great doctor, and then kind of tweak it, make it mine, and add the things that I felt like were really valuable.
That's an amazing situation. It's so cool to look back on those key moments of our life. And yeah, I'll have to double check my own finances, but I don't think buying a medical practice is something I would be able to do. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Are there any other really significant challenges that you wrote about in your portion of the book that we missed?
You know, I don't think so. I think it was mostly about those challenges of immigration, of a turbulent teenage phase of kind of coming into young adulthood and making those career decisions, of kind of the challenges going through just medical education, and um, how they changed who I was and how I wanted to practice. And I think always that desire to contribute and to create something really meaningful for patients, not to just go through the motions, but how to, I think, that all those life experiences really, I feel like I've gotten through to go through a number of transformations in my own life, and um kind of became a passion to try to help others to transform their lives in a way that's meaningful to them.
As you were wrapping up the portion of your portion of the book. Was there any advice you wanted to leave along those lines, or was there like a key kind of message that you wanted to leave with somebody who's going to read that?
Yes, I think that's still evolving. I think that the most important thing is that I want people to know that change is possible. And I think the our mindsets around this, sometimes people are struggling with health issues or have life circumstances that feel insurmountable. And it can be easy to fall into that mindset of that's great for this person, but that can't happen for me. I'm stuck here and this is what life is like. And sometimes it's just knowing what you want and taking small incremental steps in that direction, I think can really open doors that you would not otherwise know about. And, um, I think I work with a lot of women in that perimenopause transition too, where women are kind of coming into that period of life where they're kind of re-familiarizing themselves with their own needs after maybe building a career or having children. I think um, internally, just knowing that there's maybe a lot more possible um than you're aware of or you give yourself credit for, and to seek support. There are people out there that can help you work towards your goals, um and that those can be not so limited.
That's amazing. I love the advice, small steps in a direction. I think is wonderful, and knowing that you're right. Like you have no idea what doors can open unless you start taking those first few steps. You
Mhm.
mentioned that you had met some of the other people who wrote in the book. Was that through like a promotion kind of a deal
Yeah,
down in New York? Same thing.
yes. Yeah. We had a book launch. I got to meet several of the other authors. There were, CEOs of whole health systems and other people in financial industries and some Hollywood types. And yeah, it was such a range of people, but it's a challenge definitely to kind of go out there and show a different side of yourself, but it was a really cool and positive experience and another way of kind of maybe pushing something positive into the world.
I love that. Is there one other story that was featured in the book that really stands out for you as like a favorite or something that was super meaningful or inspiring to you?
Um, there was a number. I don't think I can land on just one right now. There are so many amazing, remarkable people who really embrace that vulnerability and were able to show that whatever hilltop they might be standing on now, the way they got there was pretty messy. So um, check it out if you have the time.
Awesome. Triumphs of Transformation. It's available in print on Amazon. Are they doing an Audible as well? Is there an audio version of it?
I think right now there's not. Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's on. Mhm.
Yeah. And how many pages were you responsible for in the book? Like, was it quite a long piece that you had to write?
I think it's like 15, about 15, not too
Okay.
long.
Okay. So if you ever had to do the audio for that, that wouldn't be too terrible. I've heard that's really, really
No, it
hard.
wouldn't.
Yeah. I've heard
Yeah,
that's like the worst
exactly.
part.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Super cool. I really appreciate you coming back on to share that part of your story. It's certainly not a side of your story that I've heard very much. And so I think it's really cool that you would be willing to put it out there, write about it, get it in the book, and come on and share it with us today. So super grateful for you. Tell our audience again, one more time, where they can go to find you and connect with you and your work.
Amazing. Yes, thank you for having me. So we are online at thegajerpractice.com. It's Gajer. And on when you reach that web page, there's a button at the top that says free intro call. That's the best way to connect with us, to ask any sort of questions about whether working with me would be appropriate for your situation. We're also on Instagram at the Gajer Practice, and you can see clips of these interviews and things like that on there.
Excellent. We will link all of that up just like we did last time, and we'll be sure to link up the book as well so people can find that on Amazon in particular. You've done such a great job with your website and your social media. It looks really well done and clean, The website is easy to navigate. I made mine a little bit too busy, and my social media is an absolute mess of all kinds of crap that has nothing to do with our business. Way too many hockey videos and cat videos and such. Anyway, you did an amazing job. And like I said, so grateful for you and everything that you've gone through, and so grateful that you'd come back and share your story here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course, such an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.